Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Chof Amud Aleph, starting with the Daf Yutes Amud Beis, 9 lines from the bottom. The Gemara continues its discussion in regards to Pasin La Beirois, the special dispensation kula that Chazal gave for the Ole Regalim to draw water from a well and be able to then feed their animals on Shabbos. Therefore, they said you can have Dalid Diyum Din. That's each corner is a doubled board, 1 amma by 1 amma, squaring off the be'er. And our discussion now is in regards to Abai asking his Rebbe Rabbah in regards to the Pasin La Beirois. The first 3 we saw, it's the siman of Orich, Yoiser, and Tel. Orich, we saw the first question that Abai asked Rabbah was, according to Rabbi Meir, who says you can only have a distance between one diyumid and another diyumid as 10 amos, instead of putting a pshutin in between, if it's something greater than 10 amos, in order to then more narrow the distance, can you go ahead and make the diyumid longer in order to then close off that width? The Gemara brought 2 Lishonos. The first Lashon was that you cannot make the diyumid longer. The second Lashon says that you could. The Gemara then asked Abai to Rabbah, what about according to Rabbi Yehuda, if you have more than 13 1/3 amos between two diyumid, can you go ahead and again extend the diyumid to close up that space? Or must you then go ahead and put pshutin? What does he then permit? The Gemara wants to say that according to Rabbi Yehuda that you could not make longer the diyumid. The Gemara then rejected that. The third question that Abai posed to Rabbah was in regards to tail. If you have a mound of 10 tfachim high, does that mound cannot be used as a diyumad? To which the Gemara brought that it's machlekes tanoim, whether you say 1 ro'in or 2 ro'in, meaning to say, if you have, let's say, a solid stone that is round, there you would require to then make 1 ro'in, perceive it as if it's going to be a square. That means that you cut it into a square, and further ro'in, that you then are able to then cut it to a space of amma al amma. So there's a machlokes tanoim whether you say that or not. The fourth question is now our discussion. Says the Gemara, boy minei abai mirabo, chitzas hakanim kana pachas mishloisha nido mishum diyumid. Can you make a kana that is going to be less than 3 tefachim? In other words, a kana of lavud. Can that suffice to be a diyumid? Says the Gemara, Omar le tanisua. Rabbah answered him, we already learned it. It says in following, Hayasham ilan or geder or chitzas hakanim nidon mishum diyumad. If you had either a tree, or you had a wall, let's say of bricks, or you had a wall of kanim, so then you can make it as your diyumid. So you see clearly that you could make chitzas hakanim to be your diyumid. My love, kana pachim mishlosha. Are we not talking about where it's less than 3 tefachim apart, whereby you have lavud? And therefore the answer to your question is yes, you can make such a kanim wall of less than 3 tefachim apart as lavud. Lo, says the Gemara, you have no proof because gudrisa tekani. There it's talking about that a wall of kanim. In other words, it's talking about where you have a trunk, let's say, of a tree that comes up 3 tefachim high and then sprouts forth kanim. That could be used as your diyumah. That's the kavana over there in Sukkah. Ihochi asked the Gemara, Hainu Ilan, then that's a tree. If it's a trunk that comes out different types of reeds, that's exactly what the Bryce had stated before when it said Elon. Velamai kana pachad mishloisha. What are you going to suggest? That instead it's talking about kana of lavud. Hainu geder, then that's the same thing as a wall. And it already stated over there, you can use a wall. Elamai islach lamemer trey gavne geder. What do you want to say? That there's two different types of geder, two different types of walls? So then hachanami trey gavne ilon. So too, there's two different types of ilon. So therefore, indeed, according to this, we cannot say that we're talking about a lavud wall. Ike da'amre, however, there's another statement, another version that says like this: Gudrisa dekani kami boy le. They were asking about this that has a tree trunk and then sprouts forth the various kanim. It says over there, can that be used as the diyumad? That's the question according to the second lashon. So the Gemara says, Du gudrisa dekani mai. What is the status? Can this be used as a diyumad? Amarle tinisua. We learned it. Hayashom geder or ilon or chitzas kakanim nidon mishum diyumad. We see over there it states that you could use indeed the chitzas hakanim as a diyumad. My love, gudrisa dekani. Is it not talking about that which we're talking about, where there's a trunk that comes up and spreads forth the kanim, and therefore the answer to the question is yes, you can use it as diyumad. Says the Gemara, lo. Kana pachim mishloisha. That's talking about kana as a lavud. Ask the Gemara, ihachi hainu geder. Then it says geder. That's the same thing. Ve'elamai gudrisa dekani. You're going to say that instead it means gudrisa dekani. That means that it's the reeds that are sprouting forth from the trunk. Hainu ilan. Then that's an ilan. Whether you want to say it's two different types of ilan. So now I'll say back, hachanami trei gavni geder. So too, there's two different types of geder. So according to this lashon, then it would state that indeed kanim that are going to be with lavud can be used as diyumad. The Gemara now turns to the fifth question. Abai then poses to Rabbah on top of Chof Amid Aleph. Boy minei abai merabo. Chotzer sheroisha nichnas lebein apasim mahu. If you have a chotzer that, we take a picture of this where we have the Dalet Diyumdin, and then on one end, meaning on one side of the wall, of the Diyumid wall, which of course is open, you have a chotzer whose entrance is going into the wall of the Diyumdin, in between the Diyumdin. So the Gemara is asking, can you go ahead and now carry from that chotzer to the inside the Dalet Diyumdin, or vice versa, or not? So this is his question again. Boy meinei abai meiraba chotzer sheroisha nichnas lebein hapasin mahu. If the chotzer enters these pasin, these boards of our Dalet Diyumdin, what is the status? Can you go ahead and carry from the chotzer to the diyumdin or not? Or vice versa? Omarle mutter. He says it's permissible, since after all, the people who are using the dal diyumdin, it's a reshus hayachid, and they themselves don't really have a permanent type of usage. They're just using it during the Ole Regalim. Therefore, we don't consider to be then people who are diurin, that are residents, and therefore they don't make it prohibited to then walk from one to the other, each reshus to the other reshus hayachid. Ask the Gemara Shtayim Mai. What happens if you have the same tziur, but instead of being one chatzer that's opened up, you have two adjacent chatzeros that are opened up into this Dalet Pasim, the Pasim Laberoyos? Do we say that the chatzer is going to then be allowed to then use the diyumdin and vice versa, or not? Because maybe each chatzer, the residents of each chatzer who have usage of this area, will then prohibit carrying one to the other. Says the Gemara, Omarle Oser. So Rabbah answered him, it's prohibited. Omar Rav Huna, and Rav Huna explains why it's prohibited, not for the reason what we just said now, but because Shtayim Asurin Vafilu Irvu Gzeira Shema Yoimru Eruv Moyel Lebein Apasim. Because if we would permit them to carry from the two Chatzeros into the area that we're talking about, the Pasim Laberos, then people will then see from the outside and think that they made an Eruv al Yidei the Daled Diyumdin. And that, of course, is not so. So even though they truly made an Eruv between themselves, there was an opening between the two Chatzeros. But since the openings that are through the Pasin Laberois appears to be that that's what made them Misarev, therefore, as a Gzeira will say, then they cannot carry into the Chatzeros, or from the Chatzer to the Pasin Laberois, or vice versa. Omar le'abai le'Rava, so Rava Omar irvu mutter. Rava argues on Rabba and says that you could allow them to carry ayidei and eruv. Omar le'abai le'Rava. Abai then says to Rava, Tanya the Messiah loch. I'll bring you a brisa that supports what you're saying. That indeed it's mutter if you make an eruv when you have two chatzeros that are going to enter the pasin laberois. Chatzer sheroisha echad nichnas lebein hapasin mutter letaltel bitoicha lebein hapasim ubein hapasin letoicha. The first din in this brisa is exactly what Rabba answered Abaye before, that when you have one chatzer that enters the pasin laberos, you can indeed carry one to the other. Aval shtayim also, the brisa goes on to say shtayim also, but qualifies it. Ba'med dvar mamurim shelo irvu. Aval irvu mutarim. When is this true? When they not make an eruv. But if they made an eruv, it will be mutar, just like Rava had stated. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, then leimati have tiyufta de Rav Huna. Let us say that we have a refutation against Rav Huna, who said it's prohibited. Or malach Rav Huna would say to you, no, hasam dahadron va'arvan. There, it's talking about a case where they actually broke down the mechitza that was between the two chatzeros, that was entering into the pasin laberois, and the people therefore would be able to see that they had another opening between the two chatzeros, whereby they made the eruv that way. In other words, there wouldn't be a confusion, and therefore you don't have to make a gzeira that even Rav Huna would agree would be mutter to carry from the chatzeros into the pasin laberos, or vice versa. The Gemara now records the sixth and final query that Abai asks Rabba. Boy minei Abai mirabo yovshu mayim b'shabbos mahu. What happens if you had the pasin laberos, but the water, the be'er dried up? What is the din? Can they go ahead and carry within those pasin, even though there's no water now, or not? They only permitted these type of walls because of the water. In other words, here we have again porus meruba ala oimed. Normally such walls are not permissible, so they allow the dalin diyumdin just in order to then allow the drawing forth of the water. But if there's no water, then you cannot go ahead and carry. Mayim ein kan, mechitza ein kan. Boy Ravin yavshu mayim b'Shabbos. Ravin asks if the water dried up on Shabbos. Ubo b'Shabbos mahu. And then during the middle of Shabbos, water, let's say it started to rain, and then it filled up again. What is the status of these dalid diyumdin? Can you carry within it? Omar le Abaye. Abaye said, Yavshu b'Shabbos lo tiboilach. The question regards to when they became dried up, the well dried up, that wasn't a question, because after all, the boy mine de mar upashi lidose, because I asked Mar, referring to Rabbah, and he answered me that it's prohibited. Once you don't have water, then you don't have the permission, the kula, to carry within the dal diyumdin. Bo nami loti boilach, but even that which you asked in regards to the rain filling up the bear in the middle of the Shabbos, that also cannot be a question that you ask. The havole mechitza ha'asui b'Shabbos, because that would be a mechitza that was made on Shabbos. Vitanya, and it states in the Brisa in regards to a mechitza that was made on Shabbos. Kol mechitza asui b'Shabbos, bein b'shogig, bein b'mezid, bein b'oins, bein b'rotzon, shma mechitza. It's a valid mechitza. So according to you then, in your question, wouldn't be even a question, since certainly would be okay, because you now have valid mechitzos once again when the water came back. But the Gemara says, "V'lav itmar lei." No, this is not going to be a question on. This is not going to be a dechia on his question, because his question is valid. Because after all, Omer of Nachman lo shanu el lizrok aval litaltel loy. This in regards to saying it's a valid mechitza that was made on Shabbos, that's in regards to then the malach of hoitzah. When a person throws, let's say from Reshus HaRabim into this area of the Dal Diyumnin, he'll be chayiv chatos. But in regards to tiltul, that we never said a mechitza lekula would be permissible to metaltel within the Dal Diyumnin. Ki itmar Rav Nachman amazing itmar. The Gemara says no, indeed, that Rav Nachman stated, he stated this in regards to mezid, but b'shoigeg, it would indeed be a valid mechitza. So therefore, indeed, we can say the answer to his question is if the water then filled up once again the be'er, then you could, yes, carry within the Daled Diyumdin on Shabbos. Omar Rabbi Elazar said the following statement: Hazorek lebein pasi haberois chayiv. If a person throws an object from the Reshus HaRabim into the area of the pasi leberos, then he's going to be chayiv for hoitzah. Ask the Gemara Pshita, ilav mechitza hi. If it wasn't a mechitza to make a Reshus HaYachid, heichi mishtari le'lamalos. How would they then permit those ole regalim to fill up the water from the be'er? Elamai, it must be that it is indeed a valid mechitzas to make a Reshus HaYachid, and that's why he's chayiv chatas for then being zorek from Reshus HaRabim to Reshus HaYachid. So poshit. Gemara says lo tzricha. The ovad ke'ein pasi be'rois b'Reshus HaRabim v'zorak l'toicha chayiv. No, he's talking about that he made a ke'ein pasi. He means that in the Reshus HaRabim, without even a be'er in the middle, they made pasi le'beirois. They made these daled diyumdin. So on that, we're saying that if he were to throw an object from the Reshus HaRabim into this area, he would be chayiv. Ask the Gemara, Hanami Pshita. That also is straightforward. Because ilav de ba'alma mechitzahi, if you would not say that in general, again, that this would be a mechitza, turning into a Reshus HaYachid, then gabe bor hechi mishtar letalta. When we'd have a bor, how would you then be permitted to then draw forth water? Elamai, it must be that indeed this makes a Reshus HaYachid, and therefore a person were to them zorek an object from the Reshus HaRabim into that area on Shabbos, then he would be chayiv. Again, we would not allow a tiltul. If a person just made a me'ain pasi libeirois in a Reshus HaRabim, we don't allow him to metaltel in that area. But l'chumra will say that if he throws an object from Reshus HaRabim into this area that is pasi libeirois, he's going to be chayiv. The Gemara says, no, we do have a chiddush, because lo tzricha afagav de kol bekoi bo rabim. Even though there are rabbim that are walking through this area, this enclosed area of daled diyumdin, still he'll be chayiv chatas. We consider the valid walls. My Kamashwan asked the Gemara, what is it coming to teach us? The loy osu rabim mevat mechitzos, because the rabbim that are coming in through this area do not mevatel mechitzos. That's why you're coming to say the chiddush, and therefore, if you were to throw an object from Reshus HaRabim into this area, it'd still be chayiv chatos because it's valid mechitzos. Rabbi Elazar chadazim. The Rabbi Elazar himself said one time. Disnan, Rabbi Yehuda says in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Im haisa derech Reshus HaRabim, mafsakton yisalken letzdodim. If you have a Reshus HaRabim, people who are traveling Reshus HaRabim are going through these areas where there's mechitzos, they're going through them, they're cutting through them, then put them aside. Meaning to say that they're going to ruin the mechitzos. V'chachamim omer ein sarich. The Chacham say you don't have to. In other words, they're not going to then invalidate the mechitzos. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar, the Amrei Travayu, and they both said, including Rabbi Elazar, Kan hodiucha koichan shemechitzos. Here they are letting you know the Chachamim, the strength of mechitzos, that even though the rabbim are going through this area, they're not going to mevad the mechitzos. So we see that Rabbi Elazar himself told us already before that indeed when rabbim go through areas where there are mechitzos, not mevatel mechitzos. So how can you tell me that that's the chiddush over here by the pasi be'eros? Because the rabbim are going through, they're not mevatel mechitzos. We already know that Rabbi Elazar said that. Answers the Gemara, no. Ime hasam. If I only had that, then hava amina kan v'lo svirule. Then I would only think when it says over here by the chachamim that they hodiucha koichan shom mechitzos, I would say over here kan hodiucha. but that Rabbi Elazar does not himself hold that way. Indeed, he will hold that they are going to mevatel mechitzos. Kamash malan kan visvirule. Therefore, the other statement comes to teach me that indeed Rabbi Elazar says kan the Chachamim are showing you the strength of mechitzos, that the Rabbim are not mevatel, and I hold that way. Ask the Gemara v'leima ha v'loy boyach. Then why don't we just say the statement before and not this statement that the Chachamim are showing you the strength of mechitzos? Answers the Gemara, v'chada michlal chaverta itmar. Really, he only said one statement. And that is that when the Rabbim go through, we don't have to worry about the Rabbim mevatel mechitzos. And this what it said, the Chachamim, that the Chachamim said that to show you the strength of the Chacham, that wasn't that Rabbi Elazar himself said that. The Talmidim of Rabbi Elazar said the statement in his name, but he himself didn't say it. How did they know it? Because of the statement that he himself said earlier, that when the Rabbim are going through the areas of mechitzos, they're not going to mevatel the mechitzos.